Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Lam Nguyen. I am the chief scientist assigned at the Department of Defense's Cybercrime Center, so we call ourselves DC3. So I have the privilege of serving in that role for the past 2 years or so. Prior to that, I was the lab director for the cyber forensics lab at DC3. And before that, I did a number of roles throughout the federal government. The reason I bring that up is because I don't have a lot of experience other than at DC3 with working for the Department of Defense. So I like to tell people I just very recently learned how to spell DoD. So you'll forgive me if, my acronyms or my usage is off. I really, really like my job. And I find that it is a privilege to serve this community every day. And so I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about what we do. What I'm really doing right now is trying to, buy some time for my slides to come up. I don't really have much to say between now and then. But all right, let's just get started. The Department of Defense Cybercrime Center is designated as one of 7 federal cyber centers delivering blah, blah, blah. Okay, I got a bunch of talking points from my public affairs people. I'm supposed to, convey this message to you. Hopefully, we don't need to have me sit here and read it to you. What I want to tell you about is what we do for a living. So how many of you have heard of DC3 prior to now? What do you know about DC3? Are we a forensics lab or a training center? Both, right? Okay, what I really want to talk about is some of the other things, the other lines of efforts that we do that maybe you don't know about. And I want to talk to you about how we're approaching those things with kind of like the innovations and the technologies that are available today. I think that it's interesting to me, right, that like 20 years ago, when I first started getting into digital forensics, we called it computer forensics back then, and I was working for the Justice Department, everybody knew about DC3. If you were doing computer forensics, you knew about DC3 because they could do what I thought of, they could do everything, right? And I was really excited to be able to join them 20 years into my career. I was excited to join DC3 because I wanted to run that lab. And what I found out is that things have gotten a lot harder, right? So, back in 1998, when we were looking at floppy diskettes and rebuilding I-Omega zip disk drives, right, I think that was a different approach to the way that the technology landscape has changed over the years. And so now, when we're looking at challenges, we're not looking at the latest IBM laptop or even the latest iPhone. We're looking at, your latest Alexa device. We're looking at your car. We're looking at what's data is available in the cloud to try to identify the evidence that we're looking for. And that changes the game quite a bit because data is everywhere now, right? And so one of the challenges that we have to face is trying to identify just where the data is before we can even look at it. And so I will step back a little bit and tell you about our main mission, right? So DC3, for those of you who don't know, DC3 is one of 7 designated federal cyber centers across the United States government. And so our main lane and our main path is digital forensics, and we're aligned actually under the Air Force. So I am actually an OSI employee. We're aligned under the TIG. The Inspector General of the Air Force, but we have this mission to serve all of DoD. And so what we do is we take all of the forensic evidence that's collected in criminal cases, and whether it's from NCIS, OSI, CID, or any of the criminal investigative services across the military, and we service them. But we do a lot more than that. And as you obviously know, we do a lot of training as well. And so I'm just curious because I keep delaying. Are we going to get slides or no slides? We are going to get slides? Okay, they're coming. Okay. I didn't know how much to delay. It's getting kind of awkward up here because I'm just making stuff up. Thanks, I appreciate that. I'm getting kind of nervous here. But so we work across the federal landscape, and we work in areas like so a lot of people think about, like, when you talk about forensics and you watch CSI, right? It's always related to law enforcement, and we do quite a bit of that. That's where our DNA resides. That's where our name comes from. DoD, like the second C, I like to say the second C in DC3 is crime, right? But we also service the intel community. We also service, work with our mission partners in CISA and Homeland Security and across the NCI JTF, the CTEC, and other organizations that have a very similar mission. And so my goal in life is try to get these missions talking and working together so that we can come up with different platforms that are whole of government solutions rather than these kind of like one-off solutions. You know what's really going to be sad is these slides are going to come up and then there's only like 4 slides and they're very disappointing. So, I've kind of built it up a little bit. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. But, it's just a lot of words. And so I can read these slides to you, right? But no one really wants me to do that. So yeah, if you want to take a picture of it and kind of get an overview, but we do service the law enforcement and counterintelligence community. We do cybersecurity and critical infrastructure protection. We do documented media exploitation, not just for criminal, but for the warfighter, downrange, and others as well. The idea behind DoD DC3 having this mission is, like, back when we started in 1998, we were just an entity of the Air Force. And so this is long before my time, so if, like, you have a problem with DC3, like, pre-2019, go talk to the other guys, like, don't talk to me. But we started out in 1998 because the Air Force had this like kind of like incredible mission space where they were more advanced than all of the other MCIOs. And you can kind of have that discussion, but essentially the Department of Defense, in their infinite wisdom, declared us to be the executive agents for what we say as digital and multimedia forensics. And so we have that stake, and we've been working in this area for decades now. Okay, so it is important to understand that, like, when we talk about forensics is a very, very big topic. We have the slice of pie that's related to the cyber and computer forensics, digital forensics. So we're not talking about DNA, we're not talking about blood work, we're not talking about fingerprints. Those belong to a different organization that's aligned under the Army. And we work very closely with them to share information and to work on compatible cases. So let me tell you, and this is my main slide, right? So if I had one slide, if I had one baseball card to talk about with DC3, this would be it. This is all of the different lines of efforts that we do. And as I go through this pinwheel, you'll kind of understand that we have evolved as an organization. So when I started out and I asked you the question of, like, what do you know about us? Most people will talk about the Cyber Forensics Lab because we have serviced organizations all across the world over the years. And so we have a, what we like to say is an ANAB accredited ISO 17025 digital forensics lab. We're accredited under standard law enforcement, just like the FBI program, the DEA program, and others. And one of the things that I like most about having worked at CFL is just kind of the things that we get in the door. And so our cyber forensics lab is a little bit different than some of your more traditional labs that you might be familiar with. We do your daily run of, like, iPhones that come in, your Samsung phones that come in. We're recovering evidence. Our folks, my examiners, go all over the world to testify on bases everywhere as expert witnesses in criminal cases. But we also have another component of that in which we call DMR. And DMR is damaged media recovery, and we're very, very good about getting data where most people have given up on. And so we spend a lot of time recovering data from black boxes, from aircraft mishaps, from Navy ships, from different devices that you may not be familiar with. So a lot of you probably have a car that's been built in the past, I would say, like 7 or 8 years. Yes? All right. So one of the things that we've been doing a lot of is trying to think outside of the box when it comes to cyber forensics, right? So if you have let's say you have a Tesla and you have an iPhone, okay? And your iPhone was purchased, like, I don't know, the new one just came out. So you have that. I hate to tell you, but like forensically, we can't break into that phone, right? The encryption is too good. Most of you who work in this industry know that, right? And so we have to roll back quite a few versions before we're able to decrypt that phone if we don't have a cooperating witness. Well, one of the things that we can do is kind of think outside of the box, right? And what CFL has gotten really good at is thinking like, well, hey, we can't break into your phone, but we can break into your car, right? And we can break into the telematics on your car. And when your car, like you get in your car and you're syncing your phone with your car, I can get that data. So I can find out the last places you've been. I can find out who you've called. I can find out who you're texting without looking at your phone. That's pretty cool. You know what else is pretty cool? You have IoT devices all over your house, right? And so if you're wearing a smartwatch, like if you have an Apple Watch, and I invite you over to my house and you decide to murder me, don't do that. You're leaving digital traces behind, right? Because when you walk into my house, your watch isn't synced to my Alexa devices, but it's got to check first, right? And so when you have that unique watch that comes into my house and tries to talk to all of my Alexa devices, there's a log of that information. So I can unequivocally prove that you were in my house at a particular time and day. That's pretty cool, right? We also have data coming from the smartwatches themselves. There have been cases now where people are looking at, hey, like I was asleep at the time. No, your heartbeat was 130 beats per minute while you were murdering your wife, right? So there are a lot of different kind of pieces of data that you just don't think about on a daily basis that we spend all of our time thinking about. Because what you see on TV in terms of CSI, right? Like when you watch these shows, and these are like really good investigators, and they're like a lot better looking than I am. But when they go, they're looking at all of these different like tread marks on, your shoes. They're looking at the prints that your tires leave in the mud, right? And apparently it's all like very unique and very provable in court. I don't think it is, but that's what they do on TV. The one thing that they never do is they never look at the virtual environment. And so we are coming into this era where there is going to be a need for capturing evidence that you don't see, that traditionally we can't capture in a forensic investigation because we're losing the data that's ephemeral. And that's something that, I try to talk to vendors about this all the time. It's like, hey, we need to start capturing this data just like we need to go in and do like a fibers analysis on the carpet, right? So we have these like really cool kits. You can walk into like a crime scene. You can get fibers out of the rug. You can look at like different kind of physical evidence. But we're not spending a lot of time talking and capturing the digital evidence and making sure that that's court ready. And so CFL's mission is changing significantly just because of all of the data that exists out there. And so if you're walking around this exhibit hall, there's not one board that I don't see that doesn't have the word cloud in it. That's where all of the data is at right now. And so how do we get that data and how do we read that data? That's going to become the next challenge for the next 5, 10, 50 years, okay? So that's the Cyber Forensics Lab. We also have a cyber training academy at DC3. So this is an actual schoolhouse. We have folks that kind of matriculate through. We started out just teaching, you guessed it, computer forensics. And so a lot of you have maybe even taken INCH and Wi-Fi and NetPlus and some of these other courses that are like the basic kind of offerings to becoming a certified digital forensic examiner. What you might want to do is retake a look at that catalog because we're changing that catalog significantly. So because of the lessons we learned from COVID, we're kind of moving both like to a in-person plus virtual. It's synchronous, it's asynchronous. There are several lines of effort within that training academy. We've also just recently built out what we call MTTs, so mobile training teams that will go to a specific AOR to train individuals there. And we've done it for both the United States government and other like allies, right? So I like to tell this story. He doesn't work with us anymore, but I like to poke fun of him because he's an easy guy to poke fun of. One of the first MTTs that we ever did was this like plush assignment. It's almost as good of an assignment as this one going to Hawaii, right? So we sent this guy to Sydney with a team to train the Australian Cyber Defense Forces. It's like a pretty good gig, 6 weeks in Sydney, right? So we sent him in February of 2020, and he sat in his hotel room for 6 months. So it's a pretty funny story because the very first MTT that we did was right before COVID broke, but not soon enough that he could actually come home. So they were stuck in the hotel in Sydney, like, and it sounds great because you're like, hey, like, I'm in Sydney on the government stuff. They wouldn't let him leave the hotel room. So that kind of stunk. But we do have those different training modalities, and we were putting more and more into our training catalog every day. So we've gone past forensics now. We're teaching cryptocurrency. We're piloting a course in crypto right now. We're piloting a course on the dark web. We have courses on managed attribution and kind of like looking at doing kind of cover one operations and those types of cyber courses, because again, the landscape is evolving, right? Things are changing so fast now that we can't just kind of like be in this stasis. And we're looking for, like, when we go to these events, we're looking for those partners to team up with to really kind of come up with the best of breed type of solutions. All right, so that's our cyber threat. Those are our what I call our traditional lines of effort. More recently, we've gotten into this vulnerability disclosure program. And so if you guys aren't familiar with what a VDP is, this was, I don't know, like, I guess it's been a while now, about 10 years ago, I'm guessing. It's probably like 7 or 8 years ago. The Pentagon did anyone hear of Hack the Pentagon? So, of course, all of the VDP guys are back there like, yeah, of course. Hack the Pentagon was this bug bounty program that was developed by the Department of Defense, and they basically said, hey, come and help us. Right? And this was a crowdsourced effort to reach out to the community and say, hey, find the vulnerabilities across this attack surface. And if you do, and you tell us about it, we'll pay you. It's a great program. Found hundreds of vulnerabilities, plugged up lots of holes, and what they decided was, hey, you know what we need? We need an enduring program. It can't be just like a 3-month pilot. It can't be a 6-month pilot. We need an enduring program that allows us to kind of continuously look for vulnerabilities using crowdsourced researchers that work from all across the world. And so what we've done is we've kind of published this like landscape, this surface area. It used to be just websites. We've kind of extended that now to a wider attack vector. And what we do is we provide safe harbor to folks that are like poking and prodding our systems. If they register, they report to us, and then they tell us about the vulnerability, right? And what that's allowed us to do is over the past, I think VDP just had their 6th anniversary. They might have had, it might be 7. We've gotten 50,000 vulnerability reports. We just very recently crossed that threshold. So this is 50,000 vulnerabilities on DoD websites, right? Some of them were like, the websites you use to safely transfer files, right? That have been taken down because of VDP and because of the vulnerabilities that it's found. So hundreds of thousands of researchers all over the world looking and assisting us in protecting DoD assets. Now, First time I heard about that, I was like, so let me get this straight. We're inviting hackers to hack our systems. Like, is that a good idea? Right? And it's a legitimate question. But I'll tell you what, like the hackers are already hacking our systems. Right? They don't need our permission to do it. That's why they're hackers. If they get our permission, then we call them researchers and white hat hackers. Right? It's a subtle difference. But the idea is that, look, there are tens of thousands. I work in the academic field. There are tens of thousands of academics that work in this area, and they're finding legitimate vulnerabilities that we need to plug up. And the reality is, in a perfect world, right, we would have scores of people constantly scouring all of our assets to make sure that those vulnerabilities don't exist. But the reality of it is that we work in a world where that's not possible. And so we need to kind of, again, think outside of the box, implement this type of innovation that allows us to kind of work with industry to identify vulnerabilities that, quite frankly, some of them have been there for years. And we're identifying, so we have an enterprise meeting where all of the directors report in and talk about what they're finding every month, and I can tell you, like, some of that stuff is scary. And it's nice that we have this kind of like army of people hitting this up. I'll talk a lot more about crowdsourcing later because I love the concept and I love the idea. So that's our VDP program. We also have another program called DICE. DICE is absolute proof that the United States government cannot come up with an acronym to save its life. So DCISE is the Defense Collaboration Information Sharing Environment. I would tell you I didn't come up with the name, okay? And apparently, the folks that work at DICE didn't come up with the name. It was dictated to us, so there. Okay, so like, I got Mike Weisskopf here, who's one of the deputy chiefs at DICE, and he's like sitting there going, I didn't come up with the name. How do we secure a surface that we don't always control, right? So, like, we're standing here in the middle of, this is like DIB Central, right? This is the Defense Industrial Base, right? How do we secure all of that information when they're working hand in hand with us? And quite frankly, I'll step back. I used to have a slide at the front of the slide deck that kind of tells you a little bit more about what DC3 is and who we are. But I found that it bores the heck out of people, so I kind of took it out of the slide deck. The one missing bullet point that I didn't mention to you is that we're 60% contractors. So our office only has about 125 government billets. The rest of them are contractors and military folk. And so when you have contractors working side by side with government folks, how are we securing all of that data? How are we making sure that downstream, across our supply chain, across the entire defense industrial base, that the DoD is securing information? And you do that in a bunch of different ways. One of those ways is what we do at DICE, which is that we provide them with the ability to share information across the DIB. So, companies that are part of this program, and we have what, like, how many companies do we have now? 1,700 companies across this, this program. Now you think, well, the DIB is like tens of thousands of companies, right? 1,700 represents, I think, almost like the 1,700 that represents 80% of our spending dollars across the DoD. Okay, these companies, when they get breached, they have very specific rules about that, what they have to share with the federal government. And so I'm not going to get too deep into it because it'll put you to sleep, but there's a concept of mandatory reporting, and then there's a concept of like voluntary reporting. The best information that we get is from voluntary reporting, because it doesn't quite arise to that level, but it's an early warning. It's the canary in the coal mine that allows all of the defense industrial base to know about a particular vulnerability or a particular kind of attack vector that's coming. And so what DICE does is it takes that data from your company and it anonymizes it, and then it shares it across the community. And that allows us to be able to, kind of provide this information sharing environment across like all of these companies, across all of their different offices. Obviously, the DICE does a lot more than that, but that is the gist of, the effort. And again, it comes back to collaboration, information sharing, and transparency. Now, there are times when you can't be transparent about things because of cross-domain problems and other types of intelligence that isn't easily shareable, right? And I'll talk more about how we handle those things. With this organization, the next directorate that we have is something called the Operations Enablement Directorate. So this is OED, and this is where our analysts sit. And so we don't have we conduct an analysis across all of the information that we gather, we enhance it, and then we provide it in IIR reports. And we do that for the intelligence community and for our friends in other areas of law enforcement and other three letters. So OED, one of the special things about them, one of the coolest things that I get to brag about is that this is a group that is what we call language and culture enabled analysts. And what that means is that these folks have language skills in the areas that they're studying. They understand the cyber threat landscape, and those people are very hard to find. So, the ability for someone to speak Mandarin, understand like cyber threats, understand the TTPs associated with, PRC's attempt at doing bad things, those are unicorns that we look to hire all the time. And they're able to enhance and provide a level of understanding to the reports that we have that, quite frankly, is missing in a lot of intelligence briefings and intelligence reports. And so we're able to enhance that. And so one of the things that usually I get like questions asked right around this time in the brief where people say like, that's a weird amalgamation of things that you guys do, right? And my response is always, we do the one because it makes us better at the other. And that is, like, I have never seen that more true across the United States government. And I can't keep a job to save my life, so I've worked everywhere in the government. But what we're able to do is, like, when we get something like a Volt Typhoon or like one of these other type of major incidents, right? We have computer forensic examiners that can recover data from like cloud-based servers. We can take that data, we can talk to our friends over at DICE and look at their landscape and look at what the DIB's looking at. We're able to then kind of enhance that information through our vulnerability disclosure programs and understanding the attack vectors. And then we're able to kind of like amalgamate all of that data in our OED directorate to be able to provide a level of enhancement and enrichment to the intelligence that we can then like feed to all of our different mission partners. Does that sound pretty good? We do it all. So we have other directorates here. I won't get into them because they're not really germane to this conversation, but obviously, we have a fairly heavy IT infrastructure that needs taking care of. The one thing that we still do, we just kind of hide it a little bit better, is we used to have a standalone directorate called the Technical Solutions Directorate. And this was a group of developers that all they did was build us tools. They're like, they're like the James, if you watch James Bond, there's a guy in the basement that's always building stuff. That's TSD. And they're able to kind of develop these very bespoke, customized tools for very, very specific situations. And so, when we get something, like for example, we very recently got a, believe it or not, I'm going to tell you this story, and then you're going to like think, is this guy being serious? But we recently conducted a forensic examination on a Build-A-Bear teddy bear. And you're sitting there going, what in the hell are these guys? So we actually had somebody who kind of bestowed a Build-A-Bear to their stepdaughter and used it to record like really creepy messages that would then transmit to the kid. And in order for us to kind of do that analysis, we had to, like, believe it or not, there's like a little RAM chip inside of this teddy bear that we were able to kind of like pull out, and we needed the code to kind of read and parse that data. TSD does that for us, right? And every day we have a different kind of challenge that looks like that, where they are able to kind of like look at a device. Hey, here's a Ring doorbell. Where's the data stored on it? Some of it's stored in the cloud, some of it's stored on the device. Here's a home security system. Where's the data stored on it? They're able to write and parse that data, and they're an integral part of what we do. Okay? All right. Strategy and partner engagement, enterprise management, those are all things like people like me are concerned about, but they're not actually that useful. Because it's what makes the place run, and I get it, it's necessary, but it's not, it's all in support of the overall mission. And it's important to understand that, like at DC3, what we're trying to do is build a culture of service. So one of the things that I get asked a lot, and I don't really understand the answer or the question itself, but is like, what are your authorities? Right? And I spend a lot of time talking about something I don't know a whole lot about, but the reality of it is it comes down to this, which is that we don't operate on our own authorities. We are a support element. We have built a culture of service to support our mission partners that have the stick, that have the authorities to do criminal investigations, to do counterintelligence operations. We are there to support them. That's our goal in life. We also are there to support each other. And again, that's why I always use that phrase. We do the one because it makes us better at the other. So, any questions so far? Yes, sir. So the question is about chain of custody and guardrails. It's a great question. One of the things that we have to be very clear about is when we do something, we have to figure out whether we're doing it under the context of a criminal investigation or if we're doing it for intelligence purposes, right? And a lot of times it flows one way. And so the guardrail is if you are out in the field and you've seized what you believe to be like a spy's laptop. Let's take a really easy example. And you want to charge it criminally, it's going to come to us. It's going to go to CFL first. Chain of custody is there. So we have a very, some would say is a Byzantine process of ingesting your evidence, assigning you a case number, and doing all of those things. We have an evidence custodian that will ingest that data, enter it into our evidence systems, keep it within CFL, and then do the criminal analysis there. If information flows out of there that is secondary or tertiary to other things that are going on, that information isn't the original and isn't part of that chain of custody. Any other questions? That was a great question. Yes, sir. Okay. The question, I think, is like the reason why we're all here, right? Which is that, like, and you didn't hear the question, it's just like, how does your, like the technologies and innovations that you're doing, like how do you see that landscape changing over the next 3 to 5 years, especially in terms of AI and ML? And if I look through my notebook here, I have some talking points about it that I can read for you. But the idea is that we are using it to enhance our analytical capabilities, right? And so let me answer your question by skipping around a little bit. So here's a great answer to your question, right? So DC3 has kind of teamed up with a lot of our mission partners and are working on something we call, I hate government acronyms, you know, but it's always got to sound kind of like cool, but then we misspell it. So InSight, or NSight, is the Enhanced Network Sensor and Intelligence Threat Enumeration. That's just like, that's really forcing that peg into a square hole or whatever that phrase is. But the idea is that we're going out there, we're putting sensors out there, and then we're using AI and ML to kind of help us analyze that data. It's a lot of data, right? And as it comes back to DC3, that sensor traffic is kind of put under the, I'm looking at my copy of the slide because like my eyes don't work so well anymore. But the sensors inspect that traffic, and we're doing it kind of like within this, if you all are familiar with MITRE, the FFRDC, they're very close partners with us. We developed this methodology, their methodology of the attack framework. We're using AI and ML to kind of like understand, collate, and curate that data into that model, right? And that's just a simple example of what we can do. We're also doing that across a wide swath of lines of effort that I can talk to in a moment in terms of how we're using kind of like this machine language to really get at the data. If you work in the cyber field, you understand that it is a vast and almost unmanageable amount of data. And the way that we are kind of leveraging AI is to help us kind of do that first pass. Is it there to replace it? Is it like, are all of the alerts good? It's getting there, right? And like, if you walk across this floor, everyone will tell you that they have the best AI ML model, right? But we also have to be very careful in that. And like, when you talk about guardrails, when you're talking about AI, you got to understand that there is a balance between using that information and feeding a model in which you don't understand where it lives, right? And that's one of the challenges that we're going to have in the next 3 to 5 years, is trying to understand that, trying to bring that in so that we can do on-prem solutions, so that we can do things that don't rely on third parties that we may not necessarily trust. It's not to say anyone's doing anything nefarious, but they are, right? Does that answer your question? Any other questions? Yes, sir. The question is critical infrastructure. And so, like, I always get myself in trouble when I do these Q&As because, like, you know, like CISA's over there somewhere, and they're like, man, that's our lane. And so I don't want to get a talking to. But no, we work with our partners at CISA and at some of these other mission partners to share intelligence. We, from a digital forensics perspective, we've worked on kind of like the ICS SCADA type of devices. We're looking at how to improve the supply chain in terms of doing forensic analysis. So one of the things that like keeps me up at night is when you buy a Cisco router, how do you know it's a Cisco router, right? And so if you're interested, I have pictures of the X-rays that we've done on Cisco routers that will show like chips kind of like soldered onto it as it passes through the supply chain. And a lot of times that's just counterfeit, right? So there's a lot of counterfeit stuff out there. Like a Cisco router, like a Cisco X model is like, it looks exactly like a Cisco Y model. The only difference is the firmware that's written into it. One costs like $10,000 and another one costs $100,000. So there is a very, very a strong incentive for like, down the supply chain for folks to counterfeit, and it's fairly easy to counterfeit. Sometimes that's the problem, and that's like the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is you buy a Cisco router and it's monitoring all your traffic, and it's also taking all of your traffic and sending it somewhere else. And that's pretty scary, right? So forensically, we need to be able to identify what a true golden image looks like so that we can have ground truth on what, like, as part of the supply chain of things that are being purchased. And we've done this with, if you can get really deep into this stuff, but like, if you've ever gotten really bored and decided to start reading the FAR, how many people have read the FAR? Nobody. And the only two people in this room that have read the FAR is the guy, like me and the other guy that's lying to you, okay? No one reads that stuff. But one of the things that we do a lot of is trying to get at ground truth of where a product is manufactured. And so we have a lot of bullet cams, and we have a lot of these different types of camera systems that we've done forensic analysis on, and we can definitively prove that they took test images in a Chinese laboratory, right? Because like all the signs in the break room shouldn't be in Chinese if it was manufactured in America, right? And so we're able to kind of recover that evidence, and that's how we're helping CISA and all of these other different organizations looking at the critical infrastructure piece. Absolutely. Other questions? Yes, sir. Yeah, so the question is how do vendors interact with us in order to kind of like better understand these problems? So one of the, it's a great question. So when we do, one of the things that as we kind of like professionalize the organization, as we evolve, what we've been doing a lot of is doing industry days, where we're like putting an RFI out and saying, hey, we're looking at these things. The other aspect of that are events just like this. And the reason why I go to these events is, if you'll notice, all I do is spend all of my time walking up and down these aisles looking for solutions. And a lot of times it's like I ran into a guy over there, and he's like, perfectly solved a problem that quite frankly, I didn't even think we had. And it's one of the ways that we're able to kind of reach out and connect with industry. There are a lot of lawyers at DC3, and so that there are kind of like, again, gates that we have to be very careful about. But absolutely, from my perspective, one of the best ways is just for us to get out there and to kind of attend these events and understand like what is being developed and produced. Any other questions? I want to tell you about something else too, because like we are in Indo-Pacific, and this is one of those things where we as DC3, under the structure of those 4 operational directorates, we're constantly trying to, again, create this culture of support to our mission partners, right? And so, if you read the National Defense Strategy, right, like I always like to tell people, page 1, it's like PRC, page 2, it's like cyber, right? Like that's the National Defense Strategy. And so one of the things that we've very recently done is we are building out what we call DC3 Pacific. And originally, the idea of this stems from the... All right. Now that we all are about to like have seizures, the idea is to bring the problem, to bring the solution closer to the problem. So if you've worked in this AOR, you know that especially in Southeast Asia, logistics can be a problem, right? So, from a DC3 perspective, one of the issues that we've always had is that like evidence is seized and it takes us like 6 weeks before we even get it, right? Like a lot of times you're in this kind of like AOR where like you got to take your packages, you got to put them on a pack mule to take to the local post office to get to the local FedEx station. And by that time, battery's dead. Battery's dead, data loss. That's a problem, right? And there are some problems that you can solve virtually, and there are some problems that you can't. One of the problems that you can't is moving physical evidence in the state that it needs to be moved in to somebody that can do the work that needs to be done on it. And so what we started out with was this idea that like, hey, I'm gonna build this prototype. And so we built a lab in San Antonio. And lab is like a very like generous word. Like he's a dude in a cubicle, right? And we started looking at like how, like, and he's busy all the time. And one of the things that we found out was just like, hey, why aren't you sending this stuff back to Ithaca, Maryland, where our headquarters is? It's just easier to do it ourselves. Wait, what? Right? Because like doing it yourself means like kind of walking all over the evidence just to like flip through someone's phone, right? And then all of a sudden you have this chain of custody problem. All of a sudden you have this problem with like tainted evidence, right? And so the idea is that in order for us to service the community better, we need to come closer to the problem. So we built this lab in San Antonio as a test case, right? And it seems to have really borne fruit. And so we decided to kind of move it internationally because that's always been the goal. And the goal is to build out DC3 Pacific in such a way that we're bringing our whole, like all of our lines of effort to the fight. Right, and so again, the idea isn't to just have a forensics lab, which we have built at Naval Air Facility at Sugi, right? So I was out there this summer. We're looking at like kind of like the equipment that we need out there, the manpower, the personnel. We're starting from scratch, so it's a long pole in the tent, but it's going to eventually yield dividends because we're able to get at cases that would never come to us, right? Just because of logistics. And if you've ever kind of moved through Japan and Guam and all of those areas, it's not like as easy as walking down, like, I live in the DC area. So like, if I want to get something somewhere, I just walk down to like 2 blocks to the local FedEx station. It can be difficult in different areas across the world, and we're recognizing, we're learning that, and we're kind of building around that model to figure out what needs to go there and what can come back home. Now, the one thing that we have learned about, and we've gotten this lesson about, is from COVID, right? And so one of the exciting things that I like to tell people about is CFL, the first federally accredited lab to go to a full teleworking model, right? That's pretty cool. People are analyzing evidence outside of the office, never been done before, right? And the way we were able to do that is kind of anticipate. So when I was a lab director at CFL, when I first came on board, the first thing I did was like, let's start looking at telework models, right? And so this was like I don't know what's going on here. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off because that's freaking me out a little bit. So this was in October 2019, right? In February 2020, we all went shut down. My employees didn't get to stop working. Why? Because they were able to access data from a telework site. We're able to do that now with Japan, right? And so the idea is how do we take this data? If you're a vendor here and you're wondering what kind of solutions I'm looking for, it's all about data transport. How do I take a terabyte of data and send it back home? Or put it in a place that back home can analyze it? Or any other hybrid solution, right? Because like when we are copying data from a forensic perspective, we need to get all of the data, right? And so when I look at your phone and you have a 1 terabyte phone, I need to send 1 terabyte of data somewhere, right? And now we do 400 of these, and that's a lot of, I can't do math, but that sounds like a lot of terabytes, right? And how do I move that in a way that allows my experts at home to be able to analyze that? And so part of the issue, not the issue, part of the challenge with DC3 Pacific is identifying what you can do on-prem, on-site, on the edge, versus what you can handle at home. And if we do our jobs well, right, and we throw in the technology, we throw in the AI, we throw in the ML stuff, right, when we're able to kind of process that in the cloud in like kind of this like neutral environment that's still safe, that's still cross-domain compatible, now we're cooking with gas, right? Because now I can have my experts work anywhere in the world. And that's something that is, it just keeps coming back. It's like me. That's when you're cooking with gas, right? Like the idea is to put the technology, right? Like the soldering equipment, the X-ray machines, all of the forensic tools, put them where you need to put them, and then get the people from anywhere. And again, this goes back to this idea of crowdsourcing, right? And so one of the things that I am, because I have like 2 minutes left, I want to tell you about a pet project of mine. And this goes to your question, right, of like, what does the landscape look like? I've worked in criminal forensics all of my life, or all the parts of my life that matter. I wasn't doing this when I was 4. One of the issues is volume. There's too much volume, there's too much data, right? And so like a long time ago when we were doing forensics, we tried to convince people like, hey, send us all of the data because we're gonna miss data if you don't send it to us. And all of a sudden I got a guy now calling me up saying, how do I send this refrigerator to you? Well, let's stop there. Let's not send refrigerators, right? But guess what? There are computers in a refrigerator. That computer's network to the home network that can identify some amount of evidence, right? Like, how do I break through all of that noise to get at what I want to look at? So here's a couple of ideas that I've been like looking at, right? One of the ideas is that there's too much data out there, there's too many devices, there's too much information, there's too many operating systems, too many apps, I can't keep track of it all. There's 2,000 apps being released daily on the different app stores, right? How am I gonna parse all of that data? So like every time my examiner gets a phone, he's dealing with anywhere between 40 and 60 apps on that phone, right? Some of it, like, you know, the Celebrites of the world have kind of figured out and said, hey, this is how we're going to parse through this stuff. Some of it came out yesterday. And so my examiner's got to go through yet another messaging app, yet another dating app, yet another whatever app to try to parse that data. How do we do that? The only way we're going to be able to do that is crowdsource it, right? We need to build like catalogs of information that we can share across a particular community so that what I do, my neighbor in the cubicle next to me doesn't have to redo again, right? And again, that's trying to be smart about identifying what can be done on site, what can be done at home, and what can be done with machine learning, right? You all have like iPhoto or something on your phone, right? And like recently now, like I can actually just search for pictures of my dog and they'll automatically come up because like, you know, Apple knows what a dog looks like. Good for Apple, right? What I need to know is what do kids look like, right? We work in a world where child exploitation is 60% of our caseload. Can you identify all of the images on that phone that are of children? Because that'll help me a lot, right? That gets rid of a lot of noise for me. Can you help me identify images that have a large proportion of flesh tones in it, right? Can you help me decipher the language that's being used? Because I don't understand. Like I recently learned the word Riz, which is apparently a word. I didn't know that. I'm old, right? Like how are we gonna keep up with this generation of language that has changed so drastically that examiners, like investigators can't even understand it, right? Give me the interpreter that does that. Somebody, anybody, please, right? Write it up, put it out there. Let's figure out a standard framework in which we can share data across organizations so that we're not all working on the same thing all the time, right? And so the one takeaway I will tell you is like, I tell my folks back at DC3, don't ever say no, right? Find a way to yes. Let's figure out whether it's with a vendor, whether it's with industry partners, whether it's with other government entities. Let's figure out a way to do that. It's not always possible. I get that, right? There are different classifications. There are different projects. There are different kind of CUI kind of information associated with things. But the reality of it is if we're not working as a wave to fend off the technology that's coming, we'll never make it. There's just way too much data. I've been standing up here. My watch has beeped at me 18 times since I've been up here because data is being sent to me by somebody, right? How are we going to look at all of this data and understand it in such a way that is going to be useful to us, either in an intelligence or a criminal investigation? The answer to that is natural language processing, right? Last thing I'll tell you, it's a little bit sad. I don't like to end with this, but it's a problem I'm working on. At CFL, right, one of the hardest cases we have to do, that my examiners have to do, is what we call death cases. These are service members that have either committed suicide or have, under not very suspicious circumstances, have passed away. We still need to do the investigation on that. We need to understand how it happened, right? One of the things that I've been researching is this notion that people speak differently when they move across the spectrum from suicidal ideation to execution, right? You talk differently. You talk differently based on the mood that you're in. And that translates to the way you write emails, that translates to the websites you look at, the things you post on Reddit, and all of the other activities that people occupy their times with on the internet. Can we create a language model that allows us to identify that and create an early warning system? I think we can. I think the technology is there. I've spoken to hundreds of psychologists and field clinicians about this. It's all right there. Somebody's just got to work on the problem. And I don't want it to be me, because that sounds like hard work. All right? So I've taken up enough of your time. I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions you have. This is stuff I'm really passionate about. I could talk about this stuff all day, but I really, really appreciate it's a privilege to be able to present this information to you, and I'm happy to answer any other questions you have offline. Thank you so much. Remember to get your badge scanned for CEU stuff by 11:15. You got 15 minutes. Thank you.